So I just went along, did the normal voice, and then whilst the sort of creative people and foodstuffs and that were sort of chatting after everybody who came in, like, what did you think of that guy, blah, 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 blah. While they were doing that, I was mucking around in the studio doing various other silly sort of character voices that I used to kind of do from time to time on More FM, because I was was I still at More FM at that stage? Maybe just. Anyway. So I was doing this kind of nasally, that nasally sort of voice. I was sort of doing that just in the studio, mucking around, not thinking that they were listening to what I was doing. I was just filling in time until they said, "Yeah, you can go." And the engineer came back on and said, "Oh, what's that voice you're doing?"
Cool.
I was like, "Oh, this is a true story." I said, "Sorry, I didn't know you guys could still hear me. I was just mucking around, filling in time." And they're like, "Do you want to try reading one in that nasally voice? Like, it's not what the clients asked for, but just for fun, do you want to try just reading one of that?" I'm like, "Okay." And back and say, so I did one in that nasally voice, and got the call the next day saying that's the one they want. Nice contrast to the Las Vegas strip club that you're in.
Yeah, well, the Las Vegas. Let me go full screen for me so you can see the Las Vegas strip club. Yeah, there it is.
Oh, there you go. Something about funny, is it? Good.
Yeah, let's talk funny, because I thought that if we're going to talk
funny,
Mr. Paul Ego, we should try and get some people on that might have a penchant. Is that the right word? To being funny?
Penchant.
How are you, Paul Ego?
Yeah, look, I'm good. Thanks. I'm good. It's I'm pleased that it's a different year to the last year.
Why is that?
There's stuff that's been happening, isn't there, in the world, and then bloody personally. So I'm still just playing around with my headphones, to be honest.
Yeah, they look good. The headphones are a good look.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if I can turn them up. There must be some way of turning them up. Anyway, that'll do. I can sort of hear you.
See,
yeah. Look, I'm good. Have we started? Are we already talking?
What are we doing? I think we're going. I think we're talking. I was wondering. So obviously we don't need to or want to get into your personal stuff, but the difference between 2023 and 2022 for you would be what?
Well, I've got a full-time job in 2023, which I'm starting very soon, which is exciting. Yeah, I haven't had a full-time job for a long time, so getting used to working every day of the week rather than just 2 or 3, as most comedians do, who just do live gigs and stuff, which is what I was doing last year. So yeah. So I'm going back to radio, back to More FM, joining the breakfast show in about 2 or 3 weeks, and looking really forward to it.
Yeah, back to the old days. Back to the old days, Paul. Back to the old days. I heard you talking about that on More FM nationwide, but there are some local More FM shows, eh? So the More FM show that goes to the nationwide audience that takes it is based in Christchurch. Are you going to be in Christchurch, or are you going to be remote?
I will be. Yes, I'll be living in Christchurch during the week, from like a Sunday night until a Friday afternoon.
Yeah,
and then Friday arvos, I will fly home to see my lovely family, or at least as many of them who are in the house now, remembering that I'm coming home. And if none of them are here, I'll just let myself in, wander around a bit, and then fly back down.
That's I mean, not to get into. I'm sure there's some backroom dealings going on.
So many back rooms, mate. They've got like 7 back rooms.
It's fascinating. I wonder if after a wee while you'll be able to do some out of Auckland remotely. Like, because I remember, I think there used to be a whatever the radio. The MediaWorks Sports channel was called for a while, and Ian Smith was on it, and he was in Hawke's Bay and I think it was Nathan Rarere, I think, was in Auckland, and they seem to be able to do that. I mean, it's much nicer in person, but I guess the opportunity to be there as well.
Yeah, totally. That is the plan, that after about 2 or 3 months, I'll move back up to Auckland. And I think they'd like everybody from the show to be in Auckland, really, because that's where all the sales, that's where the main MediaWorks building is.
Oh, for real?
But the More FM breakfast show now has been originated from a Christchurch show, so they've all been based down there for a long time. All their families are down there and that sort of thing. So it's easier to just have me go down there as one person than to uproot the whole show and go, you guys have got to go up. And as you say, the technology's come on so much now that you can actually do it from different places around the world. Somebody was telling me the other day, I think it's one of the big Aussie shows, might have been when Carrie Bickmore or someone like that was on one of the Aussie breakfast shows, and she was in Europe and like Italy with her family because for like 6 months because maybe her partner was over there working and she was just broadcasting in, and they said you just wouldn't know. It's just sounded like she was in the same room.
Well,
So
to be
it's
honest,
pretty awesome.
what we're doing right now,
Yeah.
you wouldn't know. I mean, people can see,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that you've dressed up for it, but haven't dressed the setup for radio.
I've focused on what's important. Look, I literally had a singlet and underpants on before because it's quite muggy up in Auckland today where I am. But I thought, no, look, I'll wear one of my signature shirts, but I'm not decorating this room like you have. You've gone
fair
to
enough.
a lot of effort.
But just to make you comfortable, I have no pants on, so
Good.
Yeah.
I would. Oh, honestly, in the sort of heat we're getting right now, that's the most hygienic thing. You don't want an orchid growing out of your testicles,
No, definitely not.
or any other part, to be honest. Really,
Testicle orchid sounds like an interesting brand to see down at your local plant store, though. I was
it does. Yeah.
I was watching
or a band that's playing laneways. Yeah, one of those.
Watching
two.
the announcement at More FM when you came on board at the end of last year. Watched the big thing, and I heard you talk about Kim. I heard you talk about Corbett. I was sort of experimenting. I've lost that word. It's just expecting. We'll go with expecting. A bit of a name check there. Nothing came because, like if it wasn't for the coffee in the morning as the overnight guy left, how would the show have happened? That's all I'm saying, Paul.
Well, this is very true. Yeah. So for those people who don't already know, you were the overnight guy when I was on the More FM Auckland breakfast show with Kim and Corbett and Hilary Barry. Yeah. And
it was good fun.
We would see each other. It was great times. See each other crossing different parts of the day. And yeah.
I still look back to that when I talk about, I don't like using the word career after I say my radio because it just feels a bit weird calling it, but my radio experiences. I still look back to one of those shows we did as one of the highlights of my career, which was I was on air when 9/11 happened and you guys came on afterwards and I stayed through and we were cutting audio and feeding it to the boys. And not that it's funny because I remember actually, speaking of More FM Christchurch, Simon Barnett talks about the death of Princess Diana as one of his show highlights. It's like when radio seems to make its biggest impacts, it's like probably either in times of huge joy or huge sadness. They seem to be the times when radio is most impacting. And that 9/11, when I was on air and then you guys came in afterwards, I remember having to phone Kim Adamson early to say, you might want to get up and get in because there's some things going on. And that was a fascinating time.
Yeah, it really was. Yes, I remember getting the call from you as well. I was driving into the studio and on the same road that I drive now because we're in the same house we've been in for years. And yeah, I don't know what time it would have been. I used to come in about 4:35, so it must be in that between 4 and 5 a.m. I guess. You would have called me and said, "Yeah, look, something's happening, and these planes have got into the World Trade Center." I'm like, Jesus.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay, well, I don't think we're doing many funnies today. We might have to throw out all those funny ideas that we had.
Yeah, I remember you and Kim Adamson getting in on time, and I do remember Mr. Corbett on occasion, me needing to call him as the 6 o'clock news was playing to wake him up. But he lived so close; he'd often be in there before the end of the first song. So that was not uncommon.
He was always good like that. He'd always try and choose a flat or an apartment that was, sprintable or very quick drivable distance to the studio. So yeah, he's still like that till this day. I think he works best when he just turns right up and does it. Whereas I tend to panic a bit more. I can work on the fly, but I like to be there. I don't like being late. I'm my dad in many ways. My dad used to get so angry at people being late. So angry. And I don't think I'm quite at that level yet, but I do really hate being late when there's no reason to be late. It really annoys me.
So what's the idea? Why are you going back into radio? Because like I look at your career and I see 7 Days and I see Stickman. You're still doing Pack and Save. Sometimes you wonder with the voice, has someone got it? So great. I mean, I imagine that's a great gig, right? And there's
it's awesome.
7 Days.
I love it.
And there's a stand-up routine. And so I wouldn't think. I mean, I don't need to talk about your finances. I mean, but if you got $20, I could borrow it. I would think that you're doing, you're living okay, you're having a life, you're doing some good. Why get back into radio? What's the reason?
Oh, look, no, I'm very lucky. I've been very fortunate with 7 Days, and Pack and Save has kind of certainly kept our family afloat during lockdown when there were no gigs, and 7 Days wasn't on for a while either. So that was just a regular kind of thing that would tick along every now and then. In fact, I do them from this very bedroom. I do the Pack and Save ads on this very microphone, but the only difference was I would have a big duvet over my head.
Yep.
I've still got it somewhere. I'd put it on today, but it's too hot.
Yep.
which would basically have to be like the studio, the sound deadening device.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's been really good. But I think it was just that thing where I've been very fortunate the last couple of years with 7 Days that I haven't had to work a lot, and the work that I do I really love. And I still love getting out and doing stand up and that sort of thing. But when the format of 7 Days changed and they kind of got rid of Di Hemwood and I as the regular captains, and we didn't have that regular thing to go, okay, well, this is paying the mortgage, this is just going to tick along sort of thing. I suddenly sort of went, oh, I might need, the first thing was I might just need something regular just so that I know that the bills are covered.
Yeah.
And the second thing was I think I felt, it wasn't until I actually secured the More FM gig that I thought, I think I was actually ready for a new challenge.
Nice.
Like, not that I don't need to try doing stand-up anymore, but I've been doing it for a long, long time. And so a lot of times I can just sort of turn up and do it, and I don't have to think too much about it. So I think I was ready to kind of get back into it again and sink my teeth into a new thing and put my stamp on it. And it just happened to turn up at the right time. I was just in contact with one of the MediaWorks radio bosses about an unrelated matter, actually. Some friends of ours, their son is a really good musician.
Yeah.
And so I just contacted this guy who I knew from years ago. He used Leon Ratt. He's now the basically head of content for all of MediaWorks.
Content director.
But at the time he was like, I think he was the program director at the Edge when I was working at the Rock. So I used to see him quite a lot because we're in the same building. And so I just called him out the blue and said, what would this young guy have to do if he wanted to get a song on the radio? And we just got chatting about stuff. And he said, oh, well, I've got you on the phone. Do you want to meet for a coffee? And so we just started talking about, because he's always wanted me to get back into radio, and I've never needed to because of, 7 Days was regular for me. And it just felt like the right sort of time. And I thought, well, maybe I should give it another go. And it's just felt really good. Like, meeting Lana and Adam, and I've known Gary McCormick for quite a long time. I mean, we don't see each other sort of socially, but I've known him through sort of performance circles. So we get on pretty well. And none of it has felt like, they're kicking him out and we're bringing me in and you got to, it's all felt quite friendly and a natural kind of thing to do. And there's a lot of excitement about it, which is great. So yeah, I'm really stoked.
And watching that same clip off their website, I listened to the longer version of it. There's like an audio podcast which is longer, and you talked about.
Was it any longer than the description I just gave you then? Because
I think it was half the length. Yeah, it was about half
it? Okay.
Yeah. But you talked about getting a bit emotional the night before being a sales thing, and I wonder if I've just done Talkback again for the first time in basically a decade. I filled in for Today FM over summer, and I'm like, fuck, I love this. There's something, I love this. Like I didn't really miss it. But when you get back in there, you're like, this feels normal. Is there an element of that for you as well? Now that you kind of made the decision and now you're going back, then you're like, well, this is a homecoming of some sort.
Oh, totally. When they announced it down there, I did get a bit emotional because for me, that was one of the happiest times of my life as far as that work-friend balance goes.
Thanks. I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, well obviously with you initially, Pat was the main one I'm talking about.
Thanks.
And then it was also quite good with Kim and Corbett as well. But you and I obviously had the main kind of yin and yang.
Yeah.
But no, it was just that perfect combination of a really great team. The chemistry was amazing. We were all friends outside of work, and it was just a really, really happy kind of like, I suppose, sort of 6 or 7 years of my life. So I've still got really good memories of that time. And we're still really good friends, Kim and Jeremy and Hillary and I, and we see each other quite regularly. So that to me that's More FM's still, got a really big place in my heart. So to go back to the same station again felt really good, really, really good. In fact, I was saying to somebody the other day, I think I've still got my original More FM station jacket.
Leather jacket. I've got it too.
Yeah.
The leather jacket.
Oh, no, not the leather one. Oh, I was telling somebody about the leather ones the other day.
I've got the leather one in my cupboard.
I think I got rid of the leather one.
Why didn't I wear it? I'll do a little insert right here, like in the thing, and everyone won't notice. And I'll put on the More FM Auckland leather jacket and show people. And then we'll come back to you and go, that was the jacket, Paul. And then back to you now.
Yeah. I think I stopped wearing the jacket as soon as I started putting on weight because it was quite slender. And also, you don't want to really go out with a leather jacket with More FM on it. It's not really But we had another, like these bright station jackets, which were bright blue with a big More FM logo and our name on the back. And I've always kept it because I thought, well, who's going to buy it? I'm not going to stick it in the the charity bin. Who's going to wear that? It's got my name on it. So it's been up the top of the cupboard getting dustier and dustier. So I thought I might actually get that down and wear it again on my first morning on air.
That's cool. I think I've got a piece of apparel from all of the stations I've worked at, and what I've got from More FM is the promo team's rugby jersey. So it's like a rugby jersey with the name on the back. I don't know if I've got a jacket. I don't know if I've got a jacket, but I've got the promo rugby jersey with Pat on the back. And yeah, it's the same sort of
you'd probably get more use out of that, wouldn't you? Surely than a jacket.
Yeah, I think so, because that's probably where my level of broadcasting ever got to, was driving the fucking promo van. That's about it for me. No more. Oh, my big question for you around More FM.
Yeah.
Bob Bond. Is he coming back? Is Bob Bond coming back? This is the only thing I care about.
I don't think so.
And do you have a copy of an episode that we can insert right now?
Oh, bloody hell.
You'd have to look.
Probably somewhere I could find one on something called a CD, which was a thing from the past.
CD.
And I tell you what, I did actually find somewhere in a clear file. I've got a lot of the scripts that Kim and Jeremy and I wrote for the Bob Bond episodes, and I was reading through them not very long ago, actually, only a month ago. And pretty much everyone I came across, it was like, oh, that's funny. And then you get about 2/3 down, you go, oh boy, I couldn't say that anymore. Pretty much everyone, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think we'd do that. But it was at the time, it was great. Time and a place. It was a lot of fun to do. And
let's do this. If I can find a Bob Bond episode, I'll insert it now.
In a world where peace was a dirty word, one man rallied to the call of justice. A man of courage, a man of action, a man with a tractor, Bob Bond.
Yeah, now, Lean, love, I'm off to that there Fiji, all right? Sort out the old coup thing there.
I thought you were dead.
Yeah, well, life doesn't stop just because you're dead, you know, mate. Dog Bond, to the tractor! Woof! Yeah, well, you might not think I'm dead, Dog Bond, but I am, mate, and so are you, both of us, dead. As dead as Russell Coote's fan club, mate. Dead as true bliss is what we are. Woof! No, I don't think even Jeff Wilson could save them now, Dog Bond. Woof! Still, yeah, you're right, he does look good in a dress. He could replace that fat one, couldn't he, old Brad Butternuts there? Woof! Yeah, we're going to go and see P first, mate.
And if there was nothing inserted, then we didn't find a Bob Bond episode, and it's just a little thing between me and you and what's his name from Birkenheaddale?
Brian.
The character Brian. Oh, it's just a little joke between me, you, and Brian from Birkenheaddale.
Brian from Birkenheaddale. Yeah, Jeremy did that one. That was so funny. Really
hey, tell me about oh look, before we do this, before we move on, when does that all start for punters on More FM?
Oh, look, ironically, it's the very same day that our Prime Minister has her last day. So as she's finishing on the 7th of Feb, I'm going in there. So, double the reason for people to mourn / celebrate the end / beginning of an era.
Who are they mourning and who are they celebrating? Are they mourning?
Well, I'll just leave it. I'll leave it up to people. Okay. I'll leave it up to people, to be honest.
Leave it up for the punters.
Yeah.
I have this memory, and tell me if I'm wrong. Are you
probably,
a trained?
You're probably wrong.
Are you a trained sign writer? Is that part of your history?
That is correct.
Yeah. So does that ever still play? Correct. Like, do you design your own flyers and stuff for shows that you got going on?
Yep. I still love that. I still do my own posters, and I'm told I have quite nice handwriting. So I'm always the guy who has to write on everyone's birthday cards. When we do it at home, Janine goes, "Can you write it?" So I always write. Yeah. So that's how I started before comedy, basically. Yeah. So I did a sign writing apprenticeship with an Auckland company called Peak Display, and they used to be in Ponsonby Road, and then they moved to Eden Terrace in Auckland. They're still going, I think they're still going. But so I was with them for about 10 years, sort of 5 years, and then my wife and I went overseas, and I tried stand up for the first time when we were in London, and then we came back, and I went to work for them again, and then started doing more sort of comedy stuff and just part-time sign writing. And then I basically met Jeremy Corbett and left sign writing and went into radio. But yeah, I really loved it.
Personal life went down after Corby. Professional life went up. Is that sort of?
Yeah. That's usually the way it goes. Usually, it's pretty much everybody who meets them. That's the arc. Your career might go well, but your personal life will be ruined.
I'll tell you something about Corby. I've told him
Please.
this, and I've said it
Yes.
publicly before. Is I was quite lucky. My dad worked with quite a lot of athletes and stuff growing up. So like Martin Crowe was his client, and Martin Sneddon was his client, and so there was these people around that sort of were. And I loved cricket and rugby, so these were like my heroes. But because they were around with dad, with work, I was never really kind of starstruck. And
Right,
the
okay.
one time I can remember being a bit like this was when Corby walked into the studio. And I was really
cool.
surprised. I was really surprised. I was like, oh my God, it's Jeremy Corbett. And what I realized after a while was he had done everything I wanted to do. Yeah, I looked up to Martin Crowe, but I was never going to be a New Zealand cricketer. But when Corby walked in, it's like I was doing theatre sports at the time. You know, I literally just started in radio, and I was like, it was the only time I can ever remember sort of being starstruck, other than meeting you. But that we'll put that on the side. But yeah, Corby was my one. And then, as you say, loveliest of loveliest guy. I mean, he's one of the highest profile comedians in New Zealand for a very long time. I'd been off radio away from More FM for probably 15 years, and I saw him in a furniture store. And I'm like, oh, you know, do you want to be one of those guys? Hey, do you remember me? He comes straight up to me, puts his arm around me, says g'day, says how you doing, good to see you. And I'm just like, I'm almost like, I wasn't starstruck, but I was a bit like you. But you actually remember properly, and now you're being a genuine person. So yeah, lovely.
Did
lovely
it get to that
being.
point? It always gets to that. I mean, he does have that's part of his nature. He's a lovely guy, but did it get to that point where you really wanted to just get on with buying your furniture, and he was just really hanging on to the hug?
Well, it was
the
hand slipping down the back, getting lower and lower. I was like,
down the back of the furniture, or was that what you're talking about?
Yeah. That's what my wife calls it.
Corbett.
Down the back of my furniture.
Right down the back of your furniture.
The pack and save gig is interesting as well. I always have a little chuckle because obviously, I guess through 7 days now, everyone knows it's you. Like it's obvious it's you. Whereas probably because you don't really know who the voices are until it gets outed, and now it's actually part of a running joke, or has been on 7 days when it comes up. How did that come about?
Well, that was I've been doing voice work for, I guess, on and off for, well, quite a long time, and would go for various auditions. Never really did particularly many commercials. And then that one came about probably just before 7 days, I want to say. Would have been about 2008. 2007, 2008. Anyway, just heard that Pack and Save they were doing a relaunch of their campaign, and they just had this idea for a kind of a Kiwi sort of voice to voice the Stickman character, and so I went along with a few other people. Obviously, you had a sort of booking at a recording studio. And just did my normal, like this sort of voice, just a basic kind of voice and basic kind of face too, which works out pretty well. I mean, Stickman and I, we got the same shaped head now, really, which works out beautifully. His body's a bit thinner than mine, but so I just went along, did the normal voice, and then whilst the sort of creative people and foodstuffs and that were sort of chatting after everybody who came in, like, what did you think of that guy? Blah 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 blah. While they were doing that, I was mucking around in the studio doing various other silly sort of character voices that I used to kind of do from time to time on More FM, because I was was I still at More FM at that stage? Maybe just. Anyway. So I was doing this kind of nasally, that nasally sort of voice. I was sort of doing that just in the studio, mucking around, not thinking that they were listening to what I was doing. I was just filling in time until they said, yeah, you can go. And the engineer came back on and said, oh, what's that voice you're doing?
Cool.
I was like, this is a true story. I said, sorry, I didn't know you guys could still hear me. I was just mucking around, filling in time. And they're like, do you want to try reading one in that nasally voice? Like, it's not what the clients asked for, but just for fun, do you want to try just reading one of that? I'm like, okay. And back and say, so I did one in that nasally voice and got the call the next day saying that's the one they want.
Wow.
I got it. So it was just a lucky little turn of events from me just pissing about. And
I've never heard that story.
It's turned into a 12-year gig.
Yeah, I've never heard that story that basically you almost got it by accident. How much of it is like to the script? How much do you do, and how much is sort of improv along the way?
It's a combination of all those things. So I'm very lucky in that the pretty early on they started writing to my sense of humor, I think. So, and the other thing is, like, when we first started doing them, probably at least for the first year, it was kind of like the voice I was doing was narrating the Stickman. like what
Right.
was actually happening. Like it wasn't his voice, and then we had to make a conscious decision of, or maybe we should make it like it's him talking. So
right.
that's his actual voice. So because if you look at you can probably find them on YouTube somewhere. The very early clips are more like, me kind of going, look at this guy here, the Stickman doing whatever. And then it became his actual voice talking. So, so I'm lucky in that the creative guys from FCB, which is the agency, really know my sense of humor now. And so the scripts are really very funny when they turn up. I mean, I could do them word for word if they wanted to. They're the ones that the client signed up. So we pretty much do it as they've written it. And they're pretty much always great. And then we just kind of have a play and they go, have you got any other ideas? And sometimes it's just me just changing a word or adding a pause. I'm a big fan of the pause. The pause and the silence is just the best. It's the best thing. So I'll just change a certain thing, or once I see the animation, I'll go, oh, maybe I could make a sound when he does that, or we just try and zhuzh it up just a little bit.
And like, is this a lifelong career? Is this the Briscoe's lady version of the supermarket thing? Is this going?
Well,
on
it'd be
forever?
pretty amazing if it was. I mean, even if they ended it now, I couldn't be ungrateful. It's been 12, 13 years. It's been pretty great. But I think they're still pretty popular, the ads, and I don't know what else what other sort of direction they would go in, really. Unless they just completely changed, or
it would have to be so far away from. If you're going to change direction, it would have to be almost you wouldn't want to do a U-turn. That implies doing the opposite, but it'd have to be a right turn completely to go away from something completely new. And I love the idea that you say you did it. You do them in that room with a duvet. I worked for a company, and we made a product for News Talk ZB called News Talk BC, and it was a Christmas Day program, and it was imagining that was the year 0. And it was a talkback hour of radio, and the talkback host, which was played by me, was like, oh, and there's the continuing phone calls about this weird occurrence in the sky, and isn't it weird that all these shepherds have come into town, and all that. So it was conversation going on, telling the story. And we did that in a blanket fort hut. Like, so we built couches and blankets and pillows, and that won awards all over the world. It won 9 New York Radio Awards, and like, we're up there with it's the BBC, it's the ESPN, and it's these guys who made it in a fucking blanket fort. So it's like what you can do in this day and age with a decent mic and with a blanket is amazing. And I think it's hilarious and great that you can do that from home. The technology is now here. I'd like to talk funny with you. And you've already kind of started me off by talking about trying stand-up. Tell me how you got into stand-up. No, not the slightest. No, but I want to know about your experiences, Paul Ego. Tell me about how you got into stand-up comedy. Tell me about your first gigs.
Okay, so I was living in London with my wife Janine, and we would go and see stand-up on a Friday night at a room above a pub. Many pubs, of course, in London doing stand-up Friday, Saturday. Well, most nights of the week, I guess. And just go and see line-up shows. Really loved it. It was a great Friday night out. And my sister-in-law, Maxine, was living with us at the time. She was over there traveling, so she'd live with us for a couple of months in our flat, and then she'd go off traveling. And she said to me one time after we'd been to one of these nights, she said, have you ever thought of giving that a go? Because you're pretty funny, like you're very quick. And I never had. I mean, I'd sung in bands and stuff when I was in my teens, so I was sort of a little bit used to the stage. But I'd never thought of comedy. It had just never occurred to me. I'd always enjoyed it. Big Monty Python fan. My parents were mad on Peter Sellers and the Goons, and so we'd always had a lot of humor in our house. Like my folks used to listen. They would listen to comedy records rather than music records most of the time.
Right.
So that had been sort of part of my life, but I'd never thought of it as something that I would do. But she just kept asking every time that she would come back from her travels. Like, she'd go away for a few months and she'd come back and she goes, oh, have you booked a gig? I'm like, oh, no, I thought you were joking. She goes, no, do you promise me you'll book a gig? I'm like, yep, I promise. And then she'd leave and I wouldn't do it. And so that went on for about 6 months. And then eventually I was like, oh God, maybe I should just book a gig, just to shut her up, just always going on. So I went into the Time Out, which is the sort of entertainment guide in London. You can sort of go through and find all the pubs and stuff. And, if you want to come along to an open mic night, call this number, call Terry, blah, blah, blah. So I just called up this place and they went, yeah, that's fine. Come along on a Wednesday. You need 5 minutes of material. And, I don't think they said it's got to be clean, but it's got to be your own material. Come along in a month. So I just spent the next month, as I was sign writing at the time, working for a chain of hotels over there. So had a full-time job. So on the tube each morning, I just got loads and loads of notebooks and just wrote down ideas about, all longhand. This is in the days, of course, before iPhones, and you could probably get dictaphones, I suppose, but it was all longhand, just writing, notebooks. Came up with 5 minutes of material. Invited all my friends along, which was a very brave thing. I'd never do that now. I hate people I know coming to gigs. It's awful. But first one, so I invited them along, and it was pretty good. And more importantly, my God, I loved it so much. God, what a buzz. It was just, I was like, oh, fuck, it's incredible. Just the feeling of people laughing at something that I've thought of that's not, stolen off, a record, just an idea that I had, and then laughing at it. It was just such a drug. And then I just booked as many gigs as I could. Just went and booked, sort of 6 or 8 gigs. Stupidly, this was in like the last 3 months that we were living in London, and we'd been there for 5 years. I'm like, what a fucking idiot. I'm actually in the home of comedy, right? UK, in London, and I'm leaving it to the last 2 or 3 months to try and do some gigs. So I just booked about 6 or 8 gigs, did lots of open mic spots, and thanked my sister-in-law for nagging me into doing it. And then when we came back to New Zealand in 95, I think, beginning of 95, I got my sign writing job back again, and then I started going to a place called Kitty O'Brien's in Victoria Park Market.
Yeah, down by Vic Park, I remember.
Yeah, by Vic Park. Yeah, so good pub, room above a pub, very much like the English scenario. And I think they would do a Wednesday night, like an open mic night, and a Thursday and Friday, and then there was a Saturday pro night over here in Devonport, actually, where I am, at the Masonic Hotel. They used to do a Saturday pro show. And so I just got in touch with Scott Blanks, who still runs the comedy club here in Auckland, the Classic, and just booked as many gigs as I could and started doing lots of open mic nights, and then started emceeing quite a lot, which I've always really enjoyed. Just that, not I guess because intrinsically I'm quite lazy and I quite enjoy thinking on my feet. So
right,
I always enjoyed just, turning up and talking to the audience and picking ideas and building something out of it. So I started doing a lot of emceeing, and that's sort of when I met Corbett and all those other guys, and that sort of led into radio in 7 days. And
it's funny how that happens.
So yeah.
When you did the work at the Masonic Hotel, was there a special handshake to get through the door? Is that what they did at the Masonic?
Maybe. I assume that's why it's called that initially. It's apartments now, unfortunately. No longer the cool pub it once was. But yeah.
You talk about, your sister-in-law saying you've always been funny, but when did you know you were funny? Can you remember as a kid making people laugh? Like, what was that moment that you went, oh yeah, I not even like I could do comedy, but I'm funny. I can make people laugh.
I don't know that I do, to be honest. I don't think I do have a memory like that.
You still don't think that now? You don't think you're funny now? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no, I think I'm getting there. I reckon I'm well on the way.
Okay, good.
I'm well on the way.
Yeah, look, mostly this is an intervention. I wanted to encourage you, Paul, in your comedy career. No, like, when did you know you were funny? Like, if she said you're pretty funny, I mean, there's a moment before or after that you go, oh yeah, I'm pretty funny. How did that work out?
I think there was possibly moments at parties where you'd have a few wines and just start talking to people, and I'd just start making up ideas or stories. I've always been sort of quite quick with the response, I suppose. I guess there's those moments, but I don't think there was any kind of, oh man, I can really make people laugh. I don't think it was until that first gig that I had that epiphany, which I guess was why it was so annoying that I left it for so long. And I guess that's fairly common, right? That other people see things in you that often you just don't know are there.
For sure.
Which is, I guess, like in most relationships, right? You're like, why are they still here?
Why does
and they're like, well, you're actually really great. You're like, am I? You're like, yeah, 2 or 3 days a week.
Yeah. That's good. If it is 2 or 3 days a week, that's good, because that's now Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then back to Christchurch. So you've got it made in the shade.
That's right. But unfortunately, what if the 3 days a week that I'm really great and midweek days?
Yeah.
Then I'm really in trouble. I'm just going to be coming home being a wanker.
You suck. That's really interesting that you kind of, it sounds like it was almost a formula for you. You realized after you did it that the sums work, because I'm interested if you are more of a precise prepper and a writer, because you talk about like sort of being able to improv. You see that on 7 days. Like, I've been to a couple of filmings of 7 days, and I have to say the stuff that doesn't make the show, is by far and away the best content, and it doesn't make the show for the right reason.
Yeah,
Legal,
right.
legal, racist, misogynistic, sexist, horrible, degrading, whatever it is of yourself or not you personally, but in general.
Well, certainly horrible. Yeah, we just take things to the utmost degree, which is I think I've always trusted the the editors and the producers of the show to to make those calls. And I would never say anything that I feel is too horrendous or is really hurtful to someone, but I also think you can't really stifle that kind of creative thing and be self-editing as you're saying something. So I'm sort of a big fan of just talking, just take it to,
but
and
there's a contract. There's a contract, isn't
totally.
there? Like especially between comedians. I mean, I'm not one, but I've worked in comedy. There's a contract that goes, I'm going to say, it's like a roast. I'm going to say horrific things to you, but I love you like a brother. It's like, you can call your best mate a fat cunt, right? But if some stranger on the street says it to your best mate, then you're throwing hands. You know what I mean? It's like there's a contract. And I think what's missing in comedy at the moment, if you pardon, I'm trying to say that with humility, is it feels like some of the contract between audience and comedian has been lost sometimes. I mean, we don't need to talk about the controversy about what can you say on stage or that kind of bullshit. But it seems like we're getting into a climate with a particular group of people out there with access to thumbs and Twitter that are not understanding the contract. When you say something on stage that they might not like, it is actually just a joke. And it also is a joke. It can also be a joke that misses, but it's not necessarily what the person thinks or feels. So what do you think about that? Do you think there's a misunderstanding in 2023 about the unspoken contract between performer and audience?
I guess there can be, and I guess it depends on who the performer is. I mean, there's some comedians who are very, how do I put it? They're trying, they caught the big issues. They're trying to make a statement. They're making that. Whereas I'm quite shallow and I don't really have any opinions. I just like saying really stupid things and taken to the utmost level. And I love getting a reaction out of people. And
right.
I wouldn't say I'm a shock jock or anything like that. But even my boys, we were having dinner last night, and I'll say things that I know will get them. I know will go them. But I just love saying them with a straight face. My son Gabriel will go, "You are horrible." I was like, "Yeah, but I actually got serious. I'm joking, And I think if people need to realize that it is a joke, particularly with me. I mean, I don't take anything seriously. That's how I deal with most things, really. Even if it's a family tragedy of some sort that's been in our family, it won't be very long before I'm making a joke about it. But that's sort of how I deal with it. It's kind of to me, it's sort of how I get through.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I always think the best sort of funerals are the ones where there's lots of laughter. It's a celebration of life, that sort of thing. But the kids thing is interesting. I feel like I've had a good week, especially with my 16-year-old. At least once a week, I can get her to say, "Dad, you can't say that." To which my response is typically, "Yeah, I know." But I know. Like I wouldn't say it out there. I'm
just saying it to you because I trust you and I love you and we have a relationship and you know what my personality and my humor is like. This is just a moment that we're sharing. Yeah. You don't then have to go and tell everybody. Certainly don't do.
My dad said this.
That. Don't do that. Turn that phone off. Turn that phone off.
You said about growing up with comedy in the house, comedy albums and stuff. Is there any particular? So does that mean you more had like you mentioned Monty Python and those kinds of performers? Did you more grow up with like comedic performers, or were there like comedy albums playing as well? And what do you remember kind of gravitating towards as a child? Probably like me, hearing from the top of the stairs, sometimes your parents playing it downstairs.
Okay, well, I had one album which I think I might still have, and it was a Basil Brush record.
All right.
And I got it for my 5th birthday. I don't know if you remember Basil Brush. He was a puppet in the UK, right? He's a fox, and so I've got this record of him, and I still, oh my God, I remember it as being so funny. And this is because it's all. I mean, that's one of the things that I still love about radio, right? It's all just the sound, and you have to use your imagination. But there's this story about him finding a baby bear in the local park, like in Wimbledon Common, like a baby grizzly bear.
Right,
And just
okay.
the conversation between Basil Brush and this bear just making horror sounds, you know. Basil Brush going, "Would you like some tea, Mr. Bear?" The bear going, "Horror, horror, horror. I don't think we do have marmalade. No, but I'll have a look." You know, it's, oh my God, I just thought it was the most amazing thing. So probably not so much now, but when I was young, that was my favorite record. And then probably from early teens, Mum and Dad had a they were big into Peter Sellers. They both loved Peter Sellers. So
Right.
I love the, oh my God, I love the Pink Panther films. But even before that, they had I think it was called Songs for Swinging Sellers. And it's Peter Sellers doing various characters. And he does like a child's TV host called Auntie Rotter. And it's like kind of, I guess, like play school, like a Susie Cato kind of thing. But
Right.
she's this really evil old lady who encourages the kids to like murder their parents when they come through the door. It's quite dark. It's really, really funny. And my mum still remembers those sketches to this day. And I have really good memories of listening to those records with Mum and Dad and just laughing, man. Yeah, it's so good.
It would be interesting to get your reaction if you listen to that Basil Brush again, see what you think today. I mean,
yeah.
Because
I think it'd still be pretty good.
But kids comedy is juvenile, but so is a lot of guys comedy. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
so I wonder if it sits still well. You mentioned the music of Peter Sellers. That's something you're sort of known for on stage as well, singing a tune, playing a comedy song along. Is that something that's still like? I don't know. I wouldn't say you're known for it, but I have seen you do it. How does that fit within your repertoire of on-stage performance?
So when I first started doing stand-up, probably within the first couple of years, I started playing a couple of comedy songs on my guitar, just purely because when you start doing your own, when you move on from doing like line-up shows in the comedy festival, for instance, which is when you get sort of 3 or 4 other comedian mates to go, okay, well, you got to do an hour. Most shows are an hour in the festival. Right. And you're like, I've only been doing it a year. I do not have an hour of material. What I have is 10 minutes of material. So you go, okay, well, we'll all try and eke it out to 15 minutes each, and we'll do 15 minutes each, and that'll be our hour. And then as you move on, you start to, if you want a bit more of a solo profile, you've got to do an hour by yourself. And I'm like, I do not have an hour of just stand-up. So how do I fill it out? I'll put some songs in there. So I think for me, the thing with me is my voice, I think, is a lot stronger than any of the comedy songs I have ever written. Right. They're not very good. I mean, they're okay. They're all right. Like but I've still got some of the early audio recordings of some of my solo shows, and I put 2 or 3 songs in there, and they're just okay. I thought they were pretty good. And then this group called Flight of the Conchords came along, and I listened to my songs and I went, yeah, no, I'm not doing those again. Because the level was just, it was there, it was just like, I don't need to do that anymore. Plus, there were much better guitarists than me too. Jeremy Elwood, who I know you've talked to on the show, is he used to do comedy songs as well. His songs were a lot better structurally than mine were. Right. And he is a considerably better guitarist, as is Jeremy Corbett, great guitarist. And I was just I was a good singer, an average guitarist, and a below average comedy lyricist. So I just went, those numbers aren't adding up. I'll just talk more. I'll just make up sillier stories and talk and ramble more, which is sort of what I tended to do, is just waffle a lot more and fill it out that way.
I'm not saying it's the same story as Billy Connolly, but Billy Connolly's story is very much, he was a folk musician, and his breaks between the songs got longer and longer and longer, and then he was a stand-up comedian.
Yeah,
so that's what
great.
he says. As I hear you describing yourself, which was strong voice, average music, that feels like the opposite of Alex Horn, from Taskmaster, because he can't sing for shit, but the content is very, very good. So
right, gotcha.
Anti-Alex. What about stand-up in particular? When you were younger, before you kind of got into it, are there comedians from your childhood, from your early days, from your 20s that you remember and look back to? I thought it was funny. So I sorry to digress. You're talking about, I asked you about memories of kind of comedy albums and stuff when you were young. You mentioned Basil Brush. Mine's Kevin Bloody Wilson. And I thought, how could there be a difference between those two characters? Basil Brush on one end of the spectrum, Kevin Bloody Wilson talking about Santa Claus on the other end of the spectrum. Who stole my fucking bike? I amused myself. But were there particular people you remember kind of going, this is gold, this is my favorite?
I think probably after listening to Peter Sellers when I was still living at home with my parents, probably my next thing that I would have heard would have been with kind of bandmates, I guess, in my late teens. I think one of them had the I remember seeing Life of Brian with them for the first time, and I hadn't really listened to Monty Python before.
Right.
And then one of them had I think it was Live at Drury Lane. It was like a double cassette. We used to play that in their cars all the time. So there was that. And then the other one that some signwriting mates used to listen to all the time was Rodney Roode. One of them had been to Australia and had a Rodney Roode cassette. And shit, that was pretty funny, man. There's some funny routines in there. There was always a line that absolutely killed me, and I would never say this on stage now, but he's talking about some woman that he had a one-night stand with, and the line is something like, "She is so ugly that her odor eaters jumped out of her shoes, ran up her back, and ate her fucking head." And that, oh my God, I just thought that's just an incredible sentence. Just the image of these and his cells running up. Anyway, I found it very, very funny.
I'm assuming from knowing some of his comedy, he didn't just say that; he screamed that into the microphone.
Yeah,
he
would have screamed that.
Head. Yeah, that's a Rodney Roode style, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. So I wasn't completely into him. I wasn't obsessed by them, but there's certain lines like that I thought, oh yeah, that's a pretty funny line. And then,
what about now? Are you someone who keeps an eye on comedy? Do you watch stand up like the Netflix type specials and stuff? Do you do any of that? Is it part of your life?
It really isn't. To me, it is the least favorite thing that I would watch is comedy. I don't know. It's just, it either feels like work, like I'm trying to research something,
right,
or I think like anybody, right? Like if you're a guitarist, somebody would go, "Do you want to watch this movie about guitars?" You go, "No, thanks. I've been doing that all day." So to me, I'll either watch it and analyze it and go, "Oh, I could do that. That's a good thing. I could try that." So not the material, but that's a good technique for doing that. Or I'd go, why don't I do something like that?
Right.
I can't just enjoy it. So for me, when I watch stuff, it's not comedy. Like if my wife and I want to sit down and watch Netflix together, she'll go, "I feel like watching something funny tonight." And I'll go, "Oh, can't we just watch a semi-violent Nordic thriller about a dead man in the woods?
Please,
just
I feel
enjoy
like
that.
7 years a slave, please. Let's have something a bit lighter tonight. Yeah.
So I don't. I mean, I know a lot of my comedian friends, the likes of Ben Hurley and all those sorts of guys grew up watching Eddie Murphy. They always talk about Eddie Murphy's specials and Dave Chappelle and all that. So I've never watched any of those. It just doesn't interest me. I sort of came into comedy a bit by accident, I suppose, and I suppose I've made my own style of just that kind of rambly, talking to the audience, picking up things and going. And I guess to a certain extent, I don't really want to watch somebody and then start emulating their kind of style. I guess.
I was going to ask that as well. Is there any part of that, we're not going as hardcore as saying plagiarism, but you hear sometimes people sort of being accused of using premises or ideas, and it might be sometimes that if you ingest a whole heap of it, I mean, like my brain's mush half the time. I don't know where half of this stuff comes from. Is there any element of that where it's like, I'll let you be you and I'll be me, and we'll just have a line of demarcation here because we can?
Yeah, I mean, there's comedians that I know that we both do a routine. Say, for instance, you both do a routine about, I don't know, getting pulled over by the cops. So if you're on the same lineup that night, you might say, "Oh, are you doing your bit tonight?" And they'll go, "No." I go, "Okay, well, I'll do it." And not that they're similar, but it can, it sounds like it's, you don't want to give people the same sort of stories, I suppose, really. I suppose. All I do remember when Bill Bailey came to New Zealand for the very first time for the comedy festival. I think it would have been mid to late 90s. I know for about 6 months afterwards, pretty much every comic sounded a little bit like Bill Bailey, because none of us had really seen anybody like him before. I mean, musically he's incredible anyway, but just these kind of weird sort of riffs, which he possibly had done at lots of other gigs, but they sounded so off the cuff, you go, "Right, here we go, comedy coming at you like a monkey throwing a stick covered in jam," just this weird sort of stuff that we would never say. So and for a long time afterwards, there were lots of comics, probably me included, who would go, "Right, comedy coming at you," and then you go, "Whoa, stop saying that, that's Will Bailey, stop saying that."
Right. Speaking of Bill Bailey, there seems to be a really interesting kind of 3-month period with a lot of international artists, like comedians coming to New Zealand. Are you going to go see them, or are you literally avoiding all of even that?
I think because, as I said, because I've seen so few of them, and I don't normally go. Every now and then, I sort of go, shit, maybe I should go and see these guys. You know, they're famous for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And then I generally miss it. I generally wait until a week after they've gone and go, yeah, I'm going to go. And they'll go, it was here last week. I go, right, I'm not going now. That's fine. I've left it too late. But no, you're right. It was Jimmy Carr, I think.
Yep.
If he's not
There's
already.
a lot.
Is he already here? Maybe he's already gone.
I think he might have come. I think Sarah Milliken's here in a couple of weeks. You've got Tom Segura coming across. You've got Bert Kreischer. There's a lot. McIntyre's coming. I know because of this new podcast, I've been going, I wonder if I could get any of them. So I've done a bit of research as to who's coming.
Yeah, right. Good
and there's a lot. There's a lot.
See,
and the answer is no at the moment. I don't have any of them, just so we know. Just it's out there.
No. See, interesting from those names that you said, I've only heard of two of them.
Right.
I've only heard of McIntyre, and I've heard of Dave Chappelle.
He's coming.
And I've heard of Jimmy Carr, but the other two guys, I don't like. Comedy's just something I love doing it when I'm doing it, but when I'm not doing it, I would rather do anything else.
Do you think also if you were to investigate, it sounds like with your upbringing and stuff as well, you might lean English. Like the two names I mentioned were kind of high profile American, but they're sort of the Dave Chappelle's, Chris Rock's are supposed to be here, and then these guys are kind of here, although still very big audiences because it's a 330 million population. Right. Do you think you lean, if you're with your comedy, you lean British?
Yeah, probably. I think the more kind of, I guess, cutting a little bit morose kind of thing. Yeah, it's funny. I look back at some of my early stuff, and I did for a time. I was really into Bill Hicks for a little while, and in fact, I hope there isn't any of my early stuff out there because some of the there was a comedy competition. I think I was in with 3 or 4 other comedians, like a Best Raw festival, and I've been watching it, and I watch it now. I'm like, oh god, I sound so angry, like it just not a very nice guy,
right?
And like, God, I'm so glad that I just moved away from that, but obviously I was just trying to emulate that kind of, this is the way life is, and you suck, these people also suck, everybody sucks, it wasn't good. So I'm glad I went in another direction.
Probably a good time to ask then is I want to ask every comedian that comes on where they sit on hecklers. I mean, there seems to be 3 kinds of comedians, no to hecklers, don't mind hecklers, encourage hecklers. That is actually out there. Where do you sit on being heckled from the audience? Is there any stories come to mind about a classic heckle?
Oh, look, I think they have their time and place. I think the people who are just really excited to be there and yell stuff out are fine if they do it for a little bit and then stop and settle down and go, I've had my moment. That's perfect, because for me, for somebody who likes to kind of work off the audience a bit and try and come up with stuff that I haven't heard myself hundreds of times, I actually find that a really good tool to work with. In fact, I did a gig down in Matamata a couple of weeks ago. I was meant to be doing it with another comic, but then he got sick, so I had to do the whole show. We're meant to be doing 40 minutes each. So I had to do 40 minutes and then take a break, and I changed shirts so that it felt like it was a different person. And then I did another 40 minutes. So I was thinking on the way down, well, I don't just want to get up there and just do 40 minutes of stand-up comedy that I've written, stop 40 minutes. I'm going to have to talk to the crowd a lot more than I normally would. So I did probably about 25 minutes at the top of just crowd work. And just talking to people and building on what they were saying. And it was shit, it went so good. It was great. And every time I do that, I'm like, why don't I do that more often? And then I settled into the material, and it kind of felt, you could almost feel people going, oh, this isn't quite as much fun as when he was just pissing around. But again, you probably can't piss around for an hour and a half either. So it's finding that kind of balance is, I think it's one of the reasons that I still love stand-up, is it still surprises me, that I get surprised about how things are going, and sometimes I'll go, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And other times I'll go, oh yeah, I've done that before and that did not work. And for some reason, I decided to do it again. I'm a guy who doesn't learn from things, despite the fact I've been doing it, 27 years or whatever it is. So it's really good. So no, I don't mind, to answer your question, I don't mind hecklers usually. It's the people who talk at a level that you can just hear. Sometimes it's a level that you can hear on stage and people in the audience can't hear. but it just
Right.
feels, oh my God, to me, it just feels like so rude. It feels so rude. In fact, the only time quite recently I lost my shit at somebody on the stage, I was playing we're playing the beach hop down in Whangamata. It was me, Brendan Lovegrove, and Ben Hurley and Liv McKenzie. And they were a great crowd, about 300 or 400 people in this big tent. They're pretty boozed because they've been out looking at the cars all day. But there was one guy just down to my left who was playing music on his phone right through the gig, like fairly loud, that him and all his mates could hear, but just obviously not interested in being there. Just looking up YouTube clips, playing music on his phone. And he got told a couple of times by the MC to stop it. And then he was still doing it when I went up. And I think I just turned around and went, "Oi, I wouldn't come into your work with my phone and play shit while you're trying to work. So turn that off, you rude fucking cunt."
But that's actually,
I couldn't help myself. And the crowd went,
true.
"Whoa, finally somebody said something."
Yeah.
Oh my God. I felt
Imagine
a little bit like, I need to sit down after that.
He probably wasn't, because he sounds like a dirtbag. But imagine if he was an accountant and you just went sat on the other side of his desk and just went and played a bit of music and just sat there the whole time and didn't do it. It reminds me of
oblivious some people are.
Reminds me of a story where I missed out on a cultural event. Kiri Takano was playing at Auckland Domain, 100,000 people, that kind of thing, and I did not want to be there. So for me, it was Bobby Brown all night on my Walkman, but I was polite enough to have headphones on. So headphones on all night. So I was sitting with the family, mum making me go, Bobby Brown and my headphones all night long. So at least a little bit of politeness.
So you were at the Domain.
I was at the Domain. Kiri Takano up on stage. Right. My family on the blanket around me.
Yeah, Bobby
Brown. And the dancing didn't quite link up with what I was hearing. It was quite weird. It was like that doesn't work. Yeah. That stage work wasn't quite the same. But
is he my prerogative? Is that him?
He is. Every little step you take.
It would be great if Kiri at one point went, "Is there anything you'd like to hear?" And you went, "My prerogative." Also, stop hitting Whitney.
Hey, tell me about ego. An overinflated
what
sense
the name,
of self.
the term?
Yeah, yeah. Paul. Yeah, we know what the term is, but where did ego come from?
No, that was a little accident as well. Most of my career seems to have been accidents. In fact, I may have had an accident just now. I had some very rich fruitcake about half an hour ago. No, that was an accident too. So my real name is actually Paul Jones. So my surname's Jones. Boring name. Pretty common name. And I thought, well, I can't just call myself Paul Jones as a comedian. That's not very interesting. I need something cooler than that. And then, so when I was a kid, my auntie used to call me Paulie Joe. Like Paulie Joe. Paulie and then Joe. So I thought, oh, I'll change that and I'll make it Paul Ego, like E-J-O. Paul Ego. I thought, okay, well, Ejo's a bit weird, but it sounds better than Paul Jones. So I think it must have only been a few gigs in. I said to the MC, "Oh, could you actually introduce me as Paul Ego?" And he's like, "Ego?" I'm like, "Yeah, E-G-O, Paul Ego." He's like, "Okay." And then I came off stage and he went, "That was Paul Ego." And so he said Ego instead of Ego. And then he came off stage and he said, "I'm sorry, I think I got that wrong, but Ego is a pretty good name." And I was like, "Yeah, actually it is. It is." And so I kept it. That was it. Yeah.
Hilarious. It works well. I remember, speaking of more FM.
Well, it's short and it's memorable and it's easy to fit into things, and it's good.
Good for a website, paulego.com. We'll get to in a second.
It's fine, Pat. It's fine.
Brent Harbour, More FM Auckland, when you were there, he told me the story of driving, I think, to his first job in radio, listening to the radio station he was going to, heard the guy on before him announce that coming up next is Brent Harbour. It's not his name. And he got in, he was like, what? And he was like, I thought it was a better name. I was looking out the window and I saw the water and I just went Brent Harbour, and that's his name in radio now. Just like that.
Yeah, amazing. In fact, I know Brent Harbour, and I don't think I know his actual name. I've always known him as Brent Harbour. There you go. So
it's not his name. My name is Marianne Smith, but I go by Pat Brittenden. Yeah.
So what happened there? Did somebody just look out at a body of water and went, Pat Brittenden?
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. Completely. Was mentioning paulego.com because I was on there today having a look at your upcoming gigs, of which there are none, because I'm guessing of the More FM.
Thanks for pointing out how much time I spend on my website, Pat.
But the question about that is, this is my last question for you, Paul Ego.
Okay.
Are you at all concerned, worried about continuing to perform stand-up what's going back to breakfast radio, because breakfast radio is fantastic, but the hours are a killer. How are you going to live in both worlds, or are you going to stop living in one world for a while? Obviously not the radio world. You're not going to stop living in the radio world.
Yeah, no, I'd still like to do stand-up. And I think for me, radio and stand-up have always fed into each other pretty well. Often you'll come up with an idea, while you're doing the radio show, and it's maybe you'll talk about it off air with your co-host, and maybe it's just a little bit not quite appropriate for the listeners, but you go, actually, that might make a good bit of stand-up. And vice versa. Sometimes I would think of something on stage and I go, oh, I'll mention that to the guys tomorrow morning. That might be a good topic to talk about. So I've always quite enjoyed both of them. And when I don't do stand-up, I actually really miss it. So I would still like to be doing stand-up at least once a month doing a gig. And I'll be based down in Christchurch, obviously, for a couple of months. And I know there's gigs down there. So I might get up on stage there from time to time. But no, I'm certainly not going to give stand-up up. No way. It's where it all started for me, Is
that kind of who you are as well? I mean, sometimes I talk to people and they act and they sing, and I go, what are you? Like, if you were to describe yourself as, what's the core? Is your core stand-up comedian?
Yeah, I think it is. It will be between. Yeah, it's a bit weird. I mean, when 7 Days came along, that felt so natural to me, sitting in that seat and just, building on ideas that other people have said and taking it somewhere else, which often you can't do as a stand-up comedian unless you're working with the audience, which is why I enjoy that, because I enjoy that sort of that collaborative thing of kind of, because I've always said I don't think I'm a very good starter of stuff. I'm not the guy who comes to the table with loads and loads of ideas. I'm not like that. Jeremy's very good at that, and Di is excellent at it. But me, I think I'm pretty good at picking up that thing and going in a different direction, or adding to it, or adding something on that somebody hadn't thought of, or putting a cherry on. And I think that's the reason that the three of us work so well on 7 Days for such a long time. So as far as that goes, I think that's why our radio show, the More FM radio show, works so well, and why it was so good when I was on the Rock. I'm good at adding to things that other people have said. So I do love stand-up, but I think I'm probably stronger in that area where you've got two or three other people and you're chatting, and I'm adding and listening to what people are saying and taking it in different directions. So I don't know if that answers your question. I love stand-up, but I think I'm slightly better. When I was at my best on 7 Days, I think I'm better at that than I possibly am at stand-up. I reckon.
Right.
Maybe.
But it's a close. There's a close.
I think it's pretty close. Yeah.
And Stickman would be 3, 4.
Well, Stickman uses all those facets, I suppose. Yeah, but if somebody said to me, "You can do radio, but you'd never do stand-up again," I'd be pretty sad about that, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It doesn't sound like you'd be sad enough to go no, but you'd be upset about it. But it might still be a.
Yeah, I guess because I've been doing it for a long time, right? 10 years ago, I'd just go, well, no, I'm not going to do that, because I'm not giving up stand-up, because I love doing it. I love all the corporate work that I do for companies and stuff, which to me is kind of like stand-up with a bit of a, you can put a bit of a funny kind of a, bit of energy into an area that's usually sometimes pretty dry balls. A lot of business stuff is, they have to sit through, hours and hours of conferences and meetings and presentations. So if you can go in there and just bring a bit of life to it, I'd love doing that sort of stuff. It's awesome.
Well, Paul Ego, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'm so glad we got a chance to hang out. And you're coming to the mainland, Haere Mai.
Yeah,
so
indeed.
We'll see you down here. You can probably come down to Dunedin and do some gigs down here as well. While I guess you'd have to travel down and back in the day though, because you go home in the week. We'll figure it out. I'll have my people.
Yeah. There's a great venue there that Paul Douglas and I did during our tour last year. Is it Dog with Two Tails?
Dog with Two Tails, yeah, on the outer octagon. Lovely bar. Yeah.
What a great space. We had a superb gig there. I'd go back there in a heartbeat. It was awesome.
Yeah, no, that was just a cafe, and then they got the room next door and they've turned it into a stage, and that's where the local comedians try their wares, and so it's very good. And there's
I love those sorts of gigs. Just 60 seaters, people are nice and close. It just feels magic. Just a real shared experience. It's awesome.
Oh, look, dude, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you.
Man.
Thank you for coming on board and talking funny with me. I've been very excited to do a few of these, and I'm very glad to have you on board. PaulEgo.com if people want to find out about all the gigs you're not got coming up in 2023 quite yet.
See, now I've got to go on there right now and update it. I never
Yeah.
get it. It's like I spent the last 2 days trying to log back into my Netflix account, which somehow I've locked myself out of. And do you think I can do it? And my website's the same. I go on there so seldom that I go in there and I go, right, how do I do this? How do I upload a picture?
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
Honestly, best of luck with More
Thanks,
FM.
man.
I mean, you don't need luck because you're a completely bona fide brilliant broadcaster.
Thank you,
So
man.
rather than saying best of luck, I'll say I can't wait to hear what you guys end up doing. And
Me too.
if we can't bring back Bob Bond, I'm just thinking after hearing you talk today, maybe some kind of Basil Brush spin-off spoof would work well. Where the main every other character on the show, the character's talking to Jacinda Ardern, and Jacinda goes, and the character based on Basil Brush goes, "No, Jacinda, we won't."
I'll tell you what, there is no such thing as a bad idea, Pat, but that would be pretty close.
Yeah, I'm with you. Hey, Paul Ego, thanks for joining us today, mate. It's been amazing.
Thanks, man. See you soon.